Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zipursky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Joining Michael on the show today is Maarten van Kroonenburg, who is the founder of BW Ventures. Now, they've helped over 200 startups in their quest to find a durable and scalable business model by helping with a structured customer-centric process that helps them figure out why, how, and what they do. But before I tell you a little bit more about what you're going to learn in today's episode, are you ready to grow and take your consulting business to the next level? Many of the clients we work with started as podcast listeners just like you. And a consistent theme they have shared with us is they had wished they had reached out sooner about our Clarity coaching program rather than waiting for that perfect time. If you're interested in learning more about how we help consultants just like you, we are offering a free, no pressure growth session call. Where on the call, we will dive deep into your goals, challenges, and situation and outline a plan that is tailor-made just for you. We will also help you identify where you may be making costly and time-consuming mistakes to ensure you're benefiting from proven methods and strategies to grow your consulting business. Don't wait years to find clarity. If you're committed and serious about reaching a new level of success in your consulting business, go ahead and schedule your free growth session call today. Just visit consultingsuccess.com/grow to book your free call today. Okay, so now let me break down what you're going to learn listening to today's podcast with Maarten. First is how to identify your prospects' real issues to close more deals effectively. How to build trust with customers to foster long-lasting relationships. How to niche your value proposition to differentiate from your competitors. How to win government contracts through strategic insights and preparation. And how to set up automated systems to support and manage your growth efficiently. Plus so much more. Here to share with you his insight and story is Maarten van Kroonenburg. Enjoy.
Maarten, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to our conversation. So I thought we would start today having you explain, you state we don't create unicorns, we breed blue whales. What does that mean?
That's correct. So I think we should go back about 7 to 8 years. That's where I started BW Ventures, Blue Whale Ventures. And especially back then, we started to focus on startups, helping startups create value propositions that could actually last. If we go back 7 or 8 years into the startup scene, everyone was focused on creating unicorns. And in my perspective, that wasn't really a good thing, especially if you lived in Europe, in which, raising capital was way harder than it is or was in the US. And these unicorns were just valued based on what the last investor actually valued you at. And of course, there's due diligence there and they have multiples and all that sort of stuff. But still was kind of a crazy idea to just create unicorns that were based on paper value instead of creating lasting companies with durable business models and, don't overgrow them and grow at a sort of 50% rate every year. But it's fine that you grow 15, 20, 25%, but do that for 20 years and be profitable and be durable. And that's why we kind of made the reference. A blue whale is the biggest animal on Earth. It's the fastest growing animal on Earth, especially in the first 3 months. It grows with 90 kilograms a day, which is a lot. And the only thing there is there are not a lot of blue whales anymore, sadly, but it's a real creature. It's not a myth.
Right.
It's not a myth that you're chasing.
Let me ask you about that, because at that time you decided to put out a message into the world, into the marketplace that you wanted to serve, which was quite counter to, let's call it the status quo, or at least what the media was talking about. And I think there's a lesson inside this for all consultants and all consulting founders. But I'd love to hear, what did you see when you put that message out that, hey, everyone's talking about creating unicorns. We don't believe that you should be focused on creating unicorns. You should be focused on creating a more sustainable, profitable. I mean, it seems very intuitive, yet the market was focused on this completely different, kind of exciting, let's build $1 billion unicorns and so forth. what was the response? What did you actually start to see? Was it a struggle, or did people kind of latch onto it right away? What was your experience?
So I think, yes, it was a struggle for at least startups in the beginning, because they just wanted to raise capital because that was the holy grail. And, the better the valuation, the better their story. But once we started to dive in and really dive into a conversation with, at that moment, a startup, later on we also applied the same things to corporates, but more on that later probably. When we dived in with startups into that conversation, they saw that creating a value proposition that actually really delivers value for a customer is the sort of main fuel that you need for your company. And once that clicked in a conversation, we didn't need to sell anything anymore, because they were like, wait a minute. If I really understand what my customer wants, and if I can deliver that with a great value proposition, a promise, then all the rest will come.
Is there anything that you would do different, knowing, again, like what you know today and what you saw, if you were to go back in time and put that message out into the marketplace, anything that you would change?
Definitely. From the get-go, I would put way more energy into branding, brand identity, and especially content. So we did that in like the first 3 months, but then operations took over, like probably every consultant has the same issues there. But I should have sticked to creating a habit of just writing or just creating, content around that message that we were trying to spread. And I think if I would go back, I would definitely change that and stick to that plan. Just stick to the habit.
Describe the structure of the business today. I believe you have maybe 8 different people that are involved in BW Ventures. What are their roles? What does that kind of look like?
We've actually have a quite atypical structure for a consulting company. So we've got a holding company, which is BW Ventures. And within the holding company, we've got like 5 to 6 people working on a payroll. And they're split in sort of facilitation. And then, we call them validators, but they're people that actually help our customers run the right experiments and gather the right data. Then next to the holding company, we've got sort of mini consulting boutiques. One more focused on corporate finance and M&A. One is more focused on creating pipeline and pipeline velocity for our customers, but all within the same sort of vision and structure to grow these new ventures. The typical thing is with these sort of mini boutiques, we've got sort of entrepreneurs, or not really partners, but they're entrepreneurs within that boutique as well. And we as a holding company still have a majority stake there. So it's a little bit different compared to the others. I'm kind of inspired by some Dutch agencies that run a lot of sub-labels, but it helps us really to position the sort of smaller stories within the bigger story that we want to tell.
So is that another way of kind of saying that you do this because you want each kind of brand or each, you call them, mini boutique consulting side, that they are real specialists or experts? Is that the real goal? And I want have you considered any other model or why not go the, let's say, more typical approach of having one company, one brand? You're just building that one company, building that one brand. You offer maybe starting off with one main service or 2 or 3 services and add as you look to scale. Why not do that? Did you ever think about that? I'm interested in how you ended up with the model that you have today, which sounds like almost running 2 or 3 different companies at one time.
So I think I've got 2 answers that actually answer your full question. So one of it was like 3 or 4 years ago, I figured that getting ourselves into new labels, so new business, was especially in Europe a matter of networking and getting the trust from your customer to actually help them, create new value propositions, etc. And that trust factor was very, very important to sealing the deals. And what I figured is once we were introduced and people trust the one that introduced us, our closing rate was like 80 to 90%, and sometimes even within 2 days. And then I'm talking about, typical deal size that we do is of 25K, starting from 25K up to 150K for one project. So it's quite high ticket, and the sort of trust factor played a very, very important role. So what we tried to do is we tried to scale BW Ventures. We tried to scale by creating partnerships with companies, for example, technical engineers that were creating very interesting technical solutions, because my reasoning was, hey, if I partner up with them, they have a very big network. People trust the company. Now what we can do is collaborate with them. So you can actually get a technical product out, and our value proposition business type of consulting would really help the customers grow. And I think the reasoning and the assumptions were very good, but the outcomes were not that good. Because what happened is that there was not enough skin in the game for like the other companies that we were working with. What practically happened is that we were still doing cold acquisition to prove that we could actually deliver more value, but that wasn't like the experiment and the strategy that I had in mind. So after like 2 years of trying that, I quit the whole strategy. I stopped the partnerships, and well, I think the best moments are in the shower, right? The idea popped up. What if I do exactly the same thing, but then focus on someone that actually has a very unique skill set that helps within like the problems that we solve for our customers, for example, corporate finance or M&A kind of skills, but then look for an individual that has a network and see if we can get them on with skin in the game. That's what we did for like, I think we started with that 2.5 years ago, and that really helped us to explode the growth.
Is that like when you mentioned that you have an entrepreneur or somebody kind of functioning like that inside of each of these kind of brands or boutiques? So you found somebody that almost could become, I think you said they're not necessarily a partner. We can talk about what that looks like in more detail, but it's somebody who's kind of like running that business or has skin in the game. They have, I would imagine, some kind of upside. So there's an incentive for them to go out and use their network. And why would they say yes to kind of coming under your umbrella if they already had that network? Why wouldn't they just run their own business? What was the incentive, or what was exciting for them to say, yes, we'd like to under your brand and grow something together?
Yeah, I think it's the flywheel that we created within the boutique. So I will dive a little bit deeper in what we do, because then it makes sense, how the flywheel actually works. So we're an innovation consultancy boutique. We're specialized in creating commercial success for innovation, because that's one of the biggest problems that we see. They create great products, great services, but they have a hard time getting it into the market and actually gaining traction on that. And for us, that all starts with what I mentioned in like your first question. It starts with building and testing a very good value proposition. And that in itself is, what the holding company does. But then what we figured is that if you have a very good value proposition, corporates have a hard time getting sales traction on a new value proposition, because they're used to selling what they actually know. And creating a sales pipeline for something that people don't know, and they don't know how the sales playbook actually works, is still a lot of, grinding, right? You just have to get out there, have the conversations, lose a lot of the sales calls, but then you start to figure how it works. Now, that's the second phase. And the third phase is most of the boards and directors state, hey, can we actually grow this quicker and faster because we see traction? And then they start to say, hey, are there any competitors that we can potentially buy? Or are there any smaller companies that we can add to this so to make it explode? And this sort of flywheel is what they're all interested in, because they know we can get in with something very small, but gain all the trust from especially our corporate clients. And then based on that, we could expand and expand and expand within the customers that we actually have.
That makes sense. So what I'm hearing from you is that you had tried this idea of partnerships, right? Partnering with kind of external firms with the idea that they already have access to your ideal clients. They can introduce you, they can refer you, they can kind of help to sell you into those organizations. But what you found over a couple of years of trying that is that because they didn't have skin in the game, because they didn't have the greatest incentive, they were running their own business, right? You're a separate business. You just weren't getting kind of the uptake, right? Or enough of that. So instead of doing that, you thought, let's find somebody who has a network, somebody who has experience and expertise. Let's essentially bring them into our company or create some kind of entity together. And they have the network, right? They have experience, but we have the machine that will actually help the end client to be successful with our pipeline building, our consulting, our strategy, our value props, all that kind of stuff. So it's like somebody who is perhaps, man or woman or whatever, but you give them the tools, you give them the sharpened tools, the tool belt. So they have what they essentially need to get the job done. And so that's the value for them, is that you're giving them what they need to be successful. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's very accurate. And the second part of the answer is I like to go niche instead of going mass market and going for just being a consultancy firm for everything in business. I don't really believe in that. So I'd rather have one label that is super niche, that is focused on just creating value propositions or just creating pipeline or that. For me, makes a lot of sense, makes a difference for the client, because we can position ourselves differently compared to a typical marketing agency or a typical sales agency or a typical innovation agency. And especially with these sort of labels, it helps to very, very sharply position us a niche there.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you're not a kind of a household brand, like if you're not a big consulting firm, specialization focus, that perception of delivering greater value, having deeper insights and really being the expert makes a lot of sense. Now, I think the question, Maarten, that many people will have as they're kind of listening to what you're sharing right now is, okay, so you're finding great people who have these networks, but how do you find them? So walk us through, where did you find these people? And then I'd also love to hear a little bit about what did the actual structure look like to bring them in terms of compensation? Like, are they paid a base salary plus performance? Is it equity? What does those pieces look like? And of course, whatever you're comfortable sharing, but just so people kind of have an idea of how to structure all that.
I think the first question I will answer is the structure. So it depends a little bit if we're creating something completely new, so a new service for the BW holding group, then it ranges between sort of 40 to 50% of equity. There's no guarantee on salary because we're growing something new there, and I'm not going to fund your base salary, because for me, that is also skin in the game. We created something from zero, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. The biggest sort of, let me think about this. What BW brings is actually already a portfolio of clients and like a very, very high rates of how customers experience our service. So that's what we bring there. Now, once they start to earn, they get a sort of priority on cash flows. And we just negotiate a sort of, it's not really a salary, but it's the priority on cash flows. And after that, there's the split. We do dividends and then we'll figure it out. For me, it's not about the dividends. For me, it's about compounding in the upcoming, let's say, 10 to 15 years. For me, that's where the value really is. And I'm happy to share that. Now, if we are not creating a new product because we like to productize our services, I think that is very important right now. But if we go into a specific niche, for example, energy transition, but we still use the products that we have, the equity stake will be a little bit lower, but like the salary is sort of a little bit higher there because we're not creating new intellectual property. You're sort of using what we already have and we're not creating something from scratch. And then equity is between 10 to, let's say, 20. But that's also because you literally create the whole operating system of VW Ventures with all its product. And the only thing that we do is create or niche down to a more specific niche or industry. Now, how do we find these people? It's funny because we actually have a very young team of consultants. So most of the people that are on our payroll are super young and we gain a lot of trust from boards.
When you say super young, just so that people know, like what, because it could mean different things to different people.
Yeah, 22 years old till 30 years old.
Okay.
I think I'm the oldest one there in our team and I'm 33 years old. So that's quite young compared to all the other consultancy boutiques. Now, it's not that we had feedback, hey, you're too young and it's not working out, because I really think it's in what you deliver, what kind of value you deliver, and then age, doesn't matter. But what I sort of wanted is I wanted to have some people around me that I could actually learn from as well. So that was what we first started to look for, people that have earned their respect and projects over many years. And for some reason, and I'm still kind of figuring out how this actually works, but I got some introductions to people. They introduced me to new people. We just sat down. I had the conversation, what I had in mind, and they were like, yeah, let's do this, literally in 1 or 2 conversations. And I think what convinced them was the story and the sort of freedom that I gave them. And once I mentioned, let's do this and dive in what you're already doing and what you have, then pieces started to click. And then there wasn't even real negotiations there. It was just super clean or not stick to the plan. They really... yeah, they committed themselves.
And so fully. How many hires like this have you made? How many people have now is this happened twice, or is it more times, or what does that look like?
Right now it's number 4. Actually.
Number 4. Okay. So you've done this 4 times, and has the experience across all 4 been relatively similar?
Yep, definitely.
And when you put this out to the market, like you said that you got introductions from people that you know to these actual people that you end up partnering with, did you just reach out to people that you know and say, hey, here's what I'm looking for? Or did you post on LinkedIn or social media? Or like, how did you get to that?
Yeah, I didn't put this on LinkedIn because I'm not quite sure if LinkedIn is the right spot to find people that for these kind of roles. I've got a network, a very small network of people that I trust for like 100%. And I just have regular conversations with them to, on one hand, structure my mind and what I'm trying to do. And they pick out the right stuff. And I don't want to manage them. I'm not asking for something, but then they come back to me and they just state, hey, you should talk to them and you should talk to them. And for people introduction, they don't have an incentive there, but I incentivize them in a different way. And that is for me where the sort of magic happens. They know that I don't want to be introduced to like somebody randomly. Just think about who you introduce. And I fully trust that they introduce the right people. Balance that I created, and it took some years to actually refine that, right? But now when I get the introductions, I know that they are very good, and I just have a super open conversation. I'm not trying to ask them something, just having a conversation of what I'm trying to do, what my ideas are, and then you'll see how the other end responds. And if that really clicks, and if you really figure out that you both have the sort of same mindset and the same way of thinking, then the rest will come there.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on that one thing that if you were able to kind of go back in time, right, and do a little bit differently, you would have done more content, publishing more regularly, sharing more of your kind of, your beliefs, your ideas, and so forth. Let's kind of fast forward to the present day. From a marketing perspective, lead generation perspective, what are you finding is actually working best to bring clients in the door, to get to the point where you're having meetings and conversations with ideal clients? What are you doing?
We're doing 3 things. We created an actual operating system for this. So we've got a BW operating system, or a BOSS as we call it internally. And the BOSS actually helps us to define the strategic pillars of BW Ventures. With regards to this question, we've got 2 very important value pillars, which is 1, customer closing, and that just tracks how are we closing customers and where do they come from. The main driver is network still. The second one is actually our prospecting operating system. So we're constantly running prospecting campaigns. It's either LinkedIn, it's email, it's sometimes it's also just calling or emailing. But I think it's like 10 to 15% of new business that comes from
prospecting. And what percentage then is coming from your network?
70%.
Okay. Let me ask you then, because on the prospecting side, I mean, this is an area that people are generally quite interested in, right? Getting opportunities from your network is something that most people already understand. It's quite commonplace, but prospecting and prospecting effectively is a challenge for many people. Can you share a little bit about what you actually do or what you actually say? I mean, I know you mentioned that it's email, it's phone, it's LinkedIn. It's so obviously a few different kind of channels that you're using. But what is your approach when you're reaching out to people that you don't know? What are you initially saying to them? What is kind of the overall message? How are you getting, or maybe if I rephrase this, what are you finding is actually working best to get people's attention so they want to move to that next step and ultimately have a conversation with you?
So I think within prospecting, you've got two ends of the spectrum. You've got like blanketing and spearing. And I'll also explain this. So blanketing is just blasting out emails, right? Sending a mass email, just personalizing the name. And maybe the other end is really digging in deep to figure out how to connect to one prospect and do way more manual work. And it depends on what kind of services you're going to deliver, on where on that spectrum you need to be. And in the beginning, it's just experimenting. You can't just have one magical formula that brings it to you. What we do is we created a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 type of customers or prospects. Tier 1s are the ones that we fully spear on. So as an example, here we helped some projects in the Netherlands, and we figured that most of them were financed by the Ministry of Defense, so the Dutch Ministry of Defense. And what we saw is that most of these companies had quite a lot of trouble with their getting into the market, and they were just focused on serving that one potential customer, the Ministry of Defense. And based on that, we actually did a campaign of just 10 people. What we did is we looked for the people within Ministry of Defense that were responsible for innovation and stimulating SME companies. Because we had experience with two of the projects that were quite important projects for the Ministry of Defense, that opened up the door immediately. So within a week, we had 7 conversations, and one of them was with the highest ranked officer within the Ministry of Defense. And they were like, come to The Hague.
Maarten, back up. So first of all, that's fantastic. But tell us more, share more of, so how did you get to that point where you got 7 conversations? Was this, you send the emails, phone calls, LinkedIn, was it a mixture? And really what I'd also love to hear is like, what did you say? Is it just essentially, here's what we do. We've worked on these other projects that are very similar. We can help you to do X. What did that kind of messaging look like?
So disclaimer here, don't do this in all your prospecting campaigns. But in this case, we figured something that these projects get quite some subsidies or grants, and officially you shouldn't name it subsidies or grants. It's more like a money that is used for R&D, but it's tax money. We figured out that only 1 or 2% of all the projects that get funded will actually get a contract for the longer run. So there's a lot of money there being spent. And everybody knows it, but the SMEs are not really feeling that. And that's literally what we mentioned in an email. So we've worked with 2 of your projects. We see there's a big risk for them that the ministry won't actually be a contractor for them in like 2 or 3 years. We think we can do this way better in a manner that you do not take the risks that you are taking right now, Ministry of Defense. And we can actually also help your SME companies to broaden their view and, make some other contractors or get some other contractors there as well. And that really opened the door. Why did it open the door? Because we really, really focused on experience, and we mentioned to them, we think we know how to fix your problem, because this should be a problem. If you feel it or not, it's too big to just not look at it. And that was the main reason that out of the 10 people, 7 people actually got into a conversation.
So you mentioned there's tiers, right? Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So tier 1 being kind of the highest value, let's say, dream client. And so it's worth your time, team's time, whatever, to do the manual research, to customize the emails or communications fully. Then tier 2 might be, right, less research, less customization. Tier 3, as you said, just maybe it's a merge tag, changing their name or company name or something along those lines, but it's quite automated, right? So you can send out a kind of preset, a sequence of messages and have that kind of go out easily. When you look at the results that you've seen across all the years of doing this, how would you kind of connect the actual results from each one of those tiers? Like if you had to just do only tier 1 or only tier 2 or only tier 3, which one would you do? Like where are you actually seeing better results? Are you seeing, is it split equally, or are you actually seeing better results from the customization and more manual research, even though it takes more time and you're reaching fewer people? How do you kind of view that just based on actual results?
Again, not a straight answer, but we create a mix. So we continuously do tier 3 outreach. We continuously do, but we continuously do tier 2 and tier 1 as well. But tier 1 is just very campaign focused. It's an idea that pops up, you think about it and you try to get in. Sometimes it's just one customer there because it's not something, it requires quite a lot of insight and creativity. And that's not something that will be out there continuously. For tier 3, we can run campaigns continuously and you don't need too much creativity for that. But on the other hand, the results are way lower. So don't expect like 10 customers out of a campaign of 100 people. What we actually create to track our results are unit cases. And the unit case it's quite known in SaaS, right?
Software as a service, yeah.
Exactly, but we created a model for ourselves there based on the SaaS model. So what we track is what are our inputs in a unit case. So how many people do we reach out to every single month? That's just a target that we set. How many people are actually interested in one way or another? How many people show up in a call, in a discovery call? How many get an offer and how many get a deal? And we've got for tier 3, tier 2 and tier 1, we've got different models because for tier 1, you can't reach 400 as I just mentioned, right? And what we do is for every campaign, we just track, okay, what do we put in? For me, the input is the most important important one because we can manage that. We can manage how many people we reach out to. I can't manage the outcomes there. But that's what we track. And that's a sort of mini data flywheel that you create within your own company. Because the more you do it, the better you learn and start to understand which campaigns are going to work, yes or no.
Yeah, I really like that. So some people might be thinking that sounds fantastic, right? Clearly you have a really good strategy and kind of a approach to this and how you manage it. But it also sounds like it could be a lot of work. So share with us because you've referred to who is actually doing this? Is this you? Is it somebody else on your team? How many people are involved in, I guess, two parts in this kind of sending of or doing the communications, doing this actual kind of lead generation work? And then how many people are involved in tracking all of the results of this on a regular basis?
So 3 people are involved in BW Ventures, but if we look at their actual time spent on our own campaign, so not for customers, it's 10% of their time. So that's not a lot. I'm involved, a sort of sales development specialist is involved, and sort of account manager, if you put it in the old school terminology.
Right. Because you're saying that this is a service that you provide for your clients as well, right? This is the pipeline type of work that you're providing for the clients that you work with. And then 3 people spend 10% of their time on this kind of business development, lead generation activity, using the systems that you use for your clients, but you also use it internally.
Yes. And I think setting up an automated system costs based on time investment. I think if we actually coded something, so it's low code, but we connected some tools to each other. We've got something in HubSpot, and then we created a sort of Power BI dashboard that actually tracks the results combined to the unit case. That is because we know it works for us, and that's why we put in the time investment. But on the other hand, if you just create an Excel and you know what kind of targets you have, and in the bottom line, have a good ROI on marketing and sales expenditures, include tracking your time. If you have a good model, then the only thing you need to do is count how many calls did I actually have, use your agenda, it's the easiest way, and how many emails or LinkedIn messages or phone calls did I actually do. And I think these 2 are the easiest inputs. The rest, you can literally do that without any coding, without any software, even just on a note block if you would like to.
But before we wrap up here in a little bit, I want to ask you a little bit more about one thing that you talked about, which is that you kind of started off focusing more on startups as being clients, and you shifted to maybe a bit of more of a focus on corporates. So question number 1 is just today, what is the percentage of your actual client base? Is it all corporates? Is it still some startups? But my second question is why the shift? Because I think a lot of people experience this where they start off focusing on one type of client. Often it could be startups or smaller businesses. They have a belief it's going to be easier, more fun to work with, whatever that might be. But they start to see certain things that open their eyes to, you know what, this may not actually be the best client for us to focus on to create the kind of business that we want. So I'd love to hear your experience and why you made that shift. But maybe just first of all, what percentage of your business today is corporate versus startup?
I think it's 95% corporate and 5% startup. What we actually did is we shifted the paying customer, and the end user is still kind of the same. So our end users could still be startups, but the one that actually pays the bills are the corporates. And why did we shift? So our vision was quite okay, I think, about 8 years ago. We had quite some trouble there.
Quite trouble with, you mean like reaching startups or getting startups to...
No, the equity part was totally fine. We always got equity into the business, and that's also why we had an investor in BW Ventures, which is quite atypical for a consultancy company as well. The main idea, the main strategy was to create a sort of portfolio of small equity stakes. Now, the first and biggest mistake that we made there is we actually bought a sort of marketing, sales and web and app development agency. And we shouldn't have done that. That's like very short. We bought it. The biggest client ran out almost immediately after signing, which made it a losing company, money losing company. And I needed to make some bold choices there because there was no cash flow coming in. We had a nice portfolio of equities, but that, it's going to take 7, maybe 15 years till it really starts to create value. It's one of the main reasons that I also split with my co-founder. And then I basically had one opportunity. So my investor mentioned to me, you're going to get half a year to reinvent the company. But you've got one goal, make sure that you are cash flow neutral so that you at least have, you're not going to ask for more and more money. 2 things I asked from him, at least give me half a year. And the second one is I want to get rid of everything that we built so far. So I want to get rid of the things that we bought. I want to get rid of everything. So he helped me with that. And within a half a year, I actually applied our own process. So I applied our own process to figure out who had the biggest problem, which customer group actually experiences the problem, and who wants to pay for a solution in that. And these two are like a big difference. And that's where I came up with like corporates that have innovation teams running for like 2 or 3 years that actually have quite some trouble scaling their ventures and scaling their startup investments and really gaining traction there. Then I figured, hey, if you really follow that money from the corporates, it actually makes a lot of sense to start invoicing them and position ourselves sort of in between there. And yeah, from there on, we got way more into the corporate innovation landscape and figured out that there was way more to do in corporate innovation, business building, than just investing or helping the startups. That's sort of the reason why we did it. And if you boil it down, yeah, it has a lot to do with where you gain your own traction and how to figure out your own model again.
Yeah. Well, Maarten, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of your journey. There's clearly so much more that we could dive into. We've really only scratched the surface here today, learning about you and your business. In the meantime, before we may look to continue that conversation, it'd be great to have you share where people can learn more about you and about BW Ventures and just everything that you have going on. What's the one place for them to go to learn more?
I think the one place is LinkedIn. So I mentioned in the beginning, I should have started with creating content from the get-go and continue that habit. I actually built the habit. So twice a week, I actually post, ideas and stuff that we do. So I think that's the main platform where you should follow me. And then from there, you can get into Substack and all the other platforms, but LinkedIn is the main one. And just go to my personal profile.
Yeah, we'll link that up then in the show notes at consultingsuccess.com. Maarten, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me again.
And there you have it for today's episode between Michael and Maarten. If you enjoyed today's podcast, then be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to today's show. And if you want to help support this podcast, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Also, a quick reminder, for show notes, including the entire transcript of today's episode, you can visit Maarten's page over at consultingsuccess.com. Also, to book your free growth session call with someone on the Consulting Success team, head over to consultingsuccess.com/grow. That's the end of the line for us this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until next time.